Hello and welcome to the VMovement interviews. Tim Wigham. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Heather. It's great to be here.
Yay. So I'd love for people watching to just give us a little message in the chat to let us know that you can hear and see us. That would be really appreciated. So what's the VMovement all about? Well, the VMovement is about helping people have the ability to get more comfortable with being vulnerable and help them to see the power in showing their whole self, being really honest and truthful, getting them more connected to their real authentic self, and allowing them then really to have a deeper connection with others because they are really showing the whole of themselves. So the VMovement is about helping people to achieve those things. Oh, thanks, Rod. Nice to see you. Good morning. I know it's morning where you are. So Tim, introduce yourself for me and let everyone know all about yourself.
Thanks, Heather. Tim Wigham, grew up in Southern Africa and then spent some time in the Royal Marines in the UK in the 90s. Went back to Cape Town to study for a year and harness my transferable skills, I guess, from a military into a commercial environment, and got into facilitation, performance coaching, I would call it looking back, although I wasn't describing it as that at the time. So management consulting, working with leadership teams on exec breakaways, then into coaching in the heavy industries, which led me into oil and gas while still living in South Africa, but working up the West African coast on offshore oil rigs. And as part of that work and conversation with the founder of Exceed, who I'm with now, a guy called Ian Mills, my family and I moved from South Africa to Scotland, to Aberdeen in 2012. So yeah, 8 years that we've been living in Aberdeen, Scotland, and I head up the performance improvement side of Exceed, which is Aberdeen based.
Wow, so quite a lot of change and direction. Seems very interesting, the routes that you've taken. So thank you. And welcome to the new viewers that have joined to the VMovement interviews Tim Wigham. So I'd love to get to know you a bit more, actually, Tim. So give us an idea of kind of what your relationship is like with vulnerability, and I'll post the question on the chat across the top so others can also answer in the chat. I'd love to hear your answers as well. So,
yeah, my relationship with vulnerability is a lot better now than it used to be. I went to a fairly traditional boys-only secondary boarding school in Zimbabwe in my teens, very focused on, being tough, looking tough. Rugby and sport was prominent. I then took a year off traveling, which in hindsight was a great steep learning curve where I was vulnerable for sure. Although at the time, again, I wasn't really embracing what was happening. I then was in the Royal Marines for 8 years. Again, a fairly male-oriented, tough, manly type environment, or at least that's what we like others to perceive of us. It was when I left the Marines, studied for a year, and embarked on perhaps the second part of my career, if you like, that I developed a relationship with vulnerability. And the reason for that was I started to fail. I started to fail often. I struggled with that. And it was only through conversation and then subsequently some coaching courses that I enrolled on that I really got to confront who I truly was, to perhaps remove the mask, as we labeled it, remove the mask, remove the armor. A few of the coaches that I worked with helped me reflect on that based on my upbringing. We're all products of our surroundings and our upbringings, as we've discussed before, Heather. So reflecting on that, taking off the mask, taking off the armor, that was the early reflection and memory I have of a relationship with vulnerability. When I did that and went through some coaching courses, I had recently got married to my wife, Angela, and we were trying to start a family, and we were really struggling to get pregnant, and something which I expected and hoped to do relatively easily, which was to start a family, wasn't happening. And that was a particularly vulnerable reference point for me, Heather, because whilst going through these coaching courses where in and of themselves, in order to become a coach, you really need to get to know yourself, which can be a very painful process for many of us. So it was painful for me, confronting my weaknesses, my fears, my frustrations from the past, and trying to process those and understand them. At the same time, my wife and I were going through an incredibly difficult time, trying to fall pregnant, going through the whole fertility journey, and ultimately going the IVF route to have children. And on reflection, that was 10 to 15 years ago. That really started to set me free, as Rod has just said there. It was a hell of a painful time. It wasn't easy. However, realizing that my wife and I wasn't the only one facing fertility frustration and the real challenges involved there, and I was also not the only coach going through the courses that I was. It helped me through, and my relationship with vulnerability was one whereby instead of associating that word with weakness, I started to associate that word with a real strength, getting to know myself and getting to realize that failure is an opportunity to learn, weakness is an opportunity to grow. That was really helpful.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you finished with that, because who else feels like when they kept failing, that's the only time they've leaned into being vulnerable or had the capability to do it. I know I certainly relate to that with my experiences. Everything was going wrong, and it was like, why is it always me? Well, actually, that's probably because you're not really putting yourself out there as the true self, are you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You get that feedback, and it's interesting. We, as performance coaches, we support teams in the upstream energy environment, again, fairly male dominated, typically offshore rig type environments. And we used to talk about safety, efficiency, consistency when reflecting on our process, which I was saying to you, Heather, is kind of the process that we have for adding value at the front line. But over the years, I've really added transparency and objectivity and vulnerability to that, because the campaigns that have the most success are the ones where the leadership team, particularly in the offshore environment, so the drilling supervisors, the operations supervisors, the rig managers, the senior leaders, when they become vulnerable, when they accept that they don't need to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, as the saying goes, if you are the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Those campaigns have been the most successful because the leaders have really acknowledged that weakness or failure or not knowing something is not a sign of a weakness or a problem. It's actually an opportunity to help the team realize that you're human. And if other humans can realize that you're a human, they are going to be more drawn to listening to you, to following you, to engaging with you, to building a relationship with you. And the other thing that comes up for me is this whole concept of kindness and approachability, coachability. If the leaders in an operational environment come across as kind, open, coachable, vulnerable, it means that frontline, the frontline workforce is much more willing to engage and offer their suggestions and offer their insights and contribute to the progress of the project. So that's been a fantastic realization, and on occasion real epiphanies on some of these projects that I've supported, when the leaders the penny has dropped and they have realized that by being willing to acknowledge when they don't know something, to acknowledge when they've made a mistake. And I've learned this many times in my own life, especially at home in a family environment, when you acknowledge that you feel scared, you don't know the answer. Others in the family are way better than you at dealing with this particular challenge. Whilst that can be quite an edge in your mind at the time, it always produces a better outcome. So both at work and at home, I've felt the power of vulnerability for sure.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned like how the difference of being at home, because you know I was gonna kind of ask this question, and definitely of the audience as well, to like, you know, do they notice the difference in their level or capability to be vulnerable more at home or in work? So I'm glad that you led to that. But actually, what I would and love to hear your thoughts, you guys that are watching, around that. What I was really interested to find out with you, Tim, is you had such a significant moment 15 years ago around vulnerability and kind of opening yourself up. When's the last time you feel like you've experienced that?
I think this COVID period has been a period of vulnerability for us all. And that would include myself. So the anxiety involved in realizing that forces are at play that are way beyond your control, that invokes a sense of anxiety and vulnerability in most, including me. So that would probably be the answer in broad terms, Heather. You know, the last year, the last 6 months, COVID, how has that manifested? Well, I can think specifically from perhaps start with a home example, homeschooling, which my wife did way better than I could have ever done. But managing the homeschooling of 3 children of different ages with me working at home during the early part of the pandemic, and the vulnerability that I felt when on several occasions the children asked me something, my wife, Ange, was managing the homeschooling, and then a realization that if we weren't joined up, that was sending mixed messages to the kids. It was potentially, you know, deviating them from the path that they were on with their particular learning. So that then caused an upset, and we needed to work through that. So I would say that the manifestation of the lockdown and working from home alongside teaching at home it was a massive point of vulnerability for me as a dad and a working professional, and it definitely affected me and my family in that respect. And then from a work perspective, again, we've probably all felt vulnerable economically. You know, we're doing our best to make sure that we survive this COVID period as an organization, as Exceed, and we're doing our best to look after the Exceed team to ensure that we all survive this economic uncertainty. But that is a point of vulnerability because, of course, circumstances outside our control continue to exist. You can focus on what you can control, but you have to accept that you're human. So you're aware of the news, you're aware of the forward concerns for this pandemic and its impact on the UK and global economies. And I think once you accept that there are certain things that you can't control and there are certain things that you can work on for yourself and to help others, that helps you progress out of the anxiety and into a period of productivity.
Yeah, and I've just put that question up for other people to share their thoughts around what they've experienced. because I actually wrote an article, I think it was last week, and the names escaped me, but I talked about vulnerability being the biggest thing that people have had to lean into because of the pandemic. You know, whether it's having to ask for money to support your business because it's not going well, you know, versus even, you know, an old lady who's used to looking after herself and always doing everything on her own, having to reach out and get people to shop for her. You know, so much of the difference. And we're just not used to it. Like, it's not like something everyone does every day, is it? Is reach out. Like, people get really uneasy when they have to do it. And I think the pandemic has either helped people learn that it's actually okay to do that, or made people feel even more isolated because they haven't got the ability to kind of reach out, ask for help, and feel vulnerable through that.
Yes, it's very interesting, isn't it? The importance of asking for help. And it's not easy for many to do. And we can probably all relate to topics, issues, you know, personal concerns that we would be pretty reluctant to share and to ask for help on. Let's just be brutally honest about that. Often pride and ego gets in the way. Let's be honest about that too. And this is where you have to flip it around, in my opinion. You have to constantly be empathetic and be kind and try and put yourself in the shoes of others. And this is where I found that some of these social media campaigns, you know, whilst some of them have been repeated quite often, I think they are quite valuable because people that are lonely, maybe social media is the only place they can turn. And if you're involved in campaigns, I mean, for example, I've been involved in the, you know, over the years, pull-ups or push-ups, just doing something different on social to maintain awareness. You're doing something different, which grabs people's attention, which then gives you an opportunity to raise awareness or remind people to reach out to friends or family that may be facing fear, they may be facing anxiety, they may be facing economic difficulty, they may be struggling to get to the shops for various reasons, or they may have a relative who's struggling. And a lot of these icebreakers or activities which seem somewhat trivial, they at least are a way of empathizing or raising awareness to help others empathize or reach out to those in need. So that's one of the things that springs to mind based on what you were saying there, Heather. And the other one is I realized that by failing, admitting my failures, my faults, my mistakes, my weaknesses, in various ways, whether it's face-to-face with friends and colleagues or direct reports, or through media channels. So putting articles out there or posts that help people realize that we're all just human. We all make mistakes. We're vulnerable. It encourages others to be vulnerable. So we should never forget that we represent role models to others. And it's this whole thing about, you know, if you expect others to demonstrate certain behaviors, then, you know, charity begins at home. We need to demonstrate those behaviors ourselves. We need to be open, receptive, kind, vulnerable ourselves. And I'm a great believer in that. And, you know, we've got to set the examples for others, be the change that we want to see in the world, as Mahatma Gandhi used to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rod's really leaned into that conversation, actually, there, Tim, because, you know, he's saying that at home he finds it much easier than work environment to be vulnerable, show up vulnerable, be more open. But also, you know, having the ability to, he feels he's opened up more in the pandemic, or you know, been able to do that more than ever before throughout the pandemic. So, you know, interesting how people have grown, you know, by having to do that, I think. And I just realized the article was called the ripple of my dog barking. See, vulnerability. Just realized the article is the ripple of impact when asking for help creates.
Right.
You know, so just leaning into like what you were saying, you know, about we need to lead first with showing like ourselves and like admitting some of the stuff that maybe we wouldn't normally, so that others can do the same. And I like completely feel that. I don't know who else, like it's really tough to like put your hand up and say, I'm not feeling so good today and I'm feeling a bit low, or, you know, I need like something to help. And it's really difficult to reach out, isn't it, sometimes? So I agree. Definitely needs to start with us, doesn't it? And,
it does, and you know, building on Rod's point there, you know, there's a couple of things spring to mind. One, this global pandemic is a once a century type of event, you know, based on history. So, yeah, our generation and perhaps several generations have not been affected by something as globally impactful as COVID-19. So that's one. You know, this is an extraordinary black swan event, and I agree 100% with Rod. You know, this time is forcing many people to confront, you know, reality, anxiety, vulnerability. The other one, coming to your point, Heather, is in a work environment and a home environment. If you think about how nice it makes you feel and how close it makes you feel to others when they approach you and say, just want to apologize, I made a mistake, or just to let you know, I did something stupid, I forgot to put the bin out, or I didn't clean that up, it's my fault, I apologize. You know, when that's done unsolicited in either a home or a work environment, we can probably all relate to how that draws us to the individual and makes us feel, wow, you know, here's someone who's secure enough in themselves to be vulnerable, to admit that they made a mistake, and to own it and to apologize for it. You know, so if you can think how good that makes you feel, just to have another human say, hey, made a mistake, and how much it makes you respect them. I think that's another key point. Is it's not something that gets done and you go, you know, and if it is, then you need to reflect on your own value system. If you think, well, yeah, idiot. Actually, what it should do, and if I reflect, I always feel is, wow, here's someone who's strong enough in themselves, secure enough in themselves to admit failure, admit mistake, admit weakness, and to own it. So have the wherewithal and the honor within themselves to say, hey, I'm not perfect, I made a mistake, I've fixed it, I'm sorting it, this is what I'm going to do, or I need your help because I don't know what to do. So I think if you can relate, if you can reflect on that, how it makes you feel, and then behave like that because you know how it will make someone else feel, those kind of subtle behaviors can really start to bring a team together and build a leadership team that respects each other.
And so powerful, just the points that you've made around respect. I think actually, you know, people do have more respect, don't they, for people that are being really open and honest, I guess. Yeah. And what I was really interested in, especially with the insights that you've already given everyone, is like what actually is vulnerability, being able to be vulnerable, given you, like, you know, even from a business or personal perspective, what has it given you?
It's given me a huge amount of freedom and a huge sense of learning about myself. So it's helped me to respect myself and to learn more about myself and to appreciate myself. And, you know, people talk about putting on your own oxygen mask. Put your own oxygen mask on first, to use the airplane analogy, in order to help others. If you don't look after yourself and learn and respect yourself, you handicap your ability to help others. So that's one of the key things there, Heather. And I'm quite into fitness and CrossFit, and CrossFit often, basically, you don't know the workout until that day or until you get to the gym. And what I love about it, and I find it analogous to life, is that we all have weaknesses in terms of life in general, and in terms of fitness. There might be certain exercises that you're good at and that you like, and others that you're not good at, you know, and you don't like. However, if you show up and just say, you know what, even if this workout is all about my weaknesses and things that I'm not good at, but I just get on with it and get through it, I will turn my weaknesses into strengths. and B, I will consistently step outside the comfort zone and learn about myself and fail at something, make mistakes, identify my weaknesses. But that's so refreshing. It does set you free because you come away from that and say, well, I now know more about myself. I also respect myself for giving it a go, and I can apply that at home and at work. So vulnerability has helped me accelerate my own personal learning curve. And it's also helped me respect myself. Whereas before, I think that self-respect was lacking because I wasn't prepared to give things a go if they felt outside my comfort zone.
Wow, that's quite a big share. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm just even on the point where you said like you grow from it. Because I always say, V power or hashtag V power is part of the V movement, because I believe that being vulnerable actually gives you more energy, a stronger ability to lean into maybe something that you've not experienced before and go openly and give it your all, versus like holding back or actually avoiding it altogether, because I've linked quite a lot of avoidance with vulnerability as well. I find people would rather avoid facing certain things or experiencing them over becoming or being seen to not know how to do something and not do it because of that being able to be vulnerable, isn't it?
Agreed. We've all fallen foul of that, and we need to acknowledge that that's part of the human condition. Part of certainly the Western human condition is it's perhaps trained into us from an early age that certain things, it's good to be seen as good at them, and if you're not, then you don't want to put yourself in a situation where that may be exposed. And yet that's where the learning takes place, and that's where the transformation takes place. So being vulnerable is critical. And Carol Dweck, in her book about mindset, she talks about the fixed and the growth mindset. Vulnerability is a huge part of the growth mindset, and the infinite game is another reference point. Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game. It's all about accepting that vulnerability helps you grow faster, whereas steering clear of vulnerability keeps you in a fixed mindset where you're just not going to unlock your own potential. So
yeah, now I mean, so that's the reason why I'm running the VMovement. Like, why I'm getting it out there.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, and I feel so privileged to have had you on today, Tim. I'm just going to share for anyone watching. Rod's saying that was a great book as well from Simon. Yeah, I agree. I'm just going to share for people watching how they can connect with you further, Tim, from a work perspective. And also you can find Tim's books at inspired-books.com as well. Is it 4 books that you've got out now, Tim?
Yeah, 4 books, Heather. An inspired series of 3, and then Accelerating Automatic, which was a collation of the key points in that series, which I produced this year.
Cool. So that's how you can connect with Tim. I'd love to gain some thoughts from people who are watching and how they found it and what insights they gained from listening. And happy for you to message me privately as well. So this has been the V Movement interviewing Tim Wigham. Loved having you on, Tim. And thanks.
Love being here. It's a privilege. Thank you.
Thanks to you guys for watching. We look forward to tuning in the next couple of weeks, where I'm finally going to have a woman be interviewed. It was quite interesting. I haven't had many women come forward for them to feature on here, so I look forward to announcing that in the next week or so.
Excellent.
See you all soon.
Thanks, Heather. See you soon.